All right, it's Friday morning on Mark Rogers TV. We talk a little South Carolina football each and every week with Will Gunter from 107.5 The Game. You can catch him on the all-new early game from 6 to 9 Eastern Time. Will, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. The countdown is on. 10 weekends from this weekend. We start the college football season. Or I guess 9. We got that kind of weird opening weekend, but 10 weekends away. We're 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks away from SEC Media Day. So actually started to get Canadian football. We had Canadian football last night. Did you get involved in some of that?
You're getting desperate, Will. No Canadian football for me. I got the family in town. We've got a graduation going on. We got all sorts of things, and I don't even think Canadian football would register with me. But but if that's what you need for the fix for the next 10 weeks, that's pretty good. At least in a couple weeks, we won't be able to watch football and talk about football, but we'll be able to talk about stuff that other people talked about at SEC Media Days. So it'll at least be fresh talk about what everybody else is talking about. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
All right.
it's just around the corner, and we'll get some exciting stuff to start really kind of at least breaking down preseason teams and media polls and things like that come out of not just SEC Media Day, but all the media days across the country as well.
Yeah, so before we get started, Will and I get together every Friday. We've got the complete conversation available for you, the audio portion on Podbean and also iTunes. Just search Mark Rogers TV. And then also the video portion, complete version at SEC Breakdown. And then, of course, the topics you can catch at Mark Rogers TV on YouTube. So we're talking tight ends this week. So if you're behind, check out the positional breakdowns. We've covered quite a few, and we make our way to the tight end position where, Will, on the surface, it appears, okay, we're all set at tight end. We've got a good one in Hayden Hurst, and that's got to be a good thing for Jake Bentley and his development. It's always good to have that security blanket in place. Then you've got a lot of prospects that are pretty interesting, especially this kid that just came on campus in Will Register. But first, tell us a little bit about Mr. Hurst.
Well, yeah, tight end is a very entertaining and interesting position for South Carolina as we enter 2017. Hayden Hurst was a guy who actually probably would have been drafted very late, maybe 6th or 7th round in this past year's draft. He was originally a baseball prospect, played in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, is a little bit older. I think he's about 23 or 24 years of age. Big physical kid, kind of came on towards the end of last year as Jake Bentley really got going and kind of learn the offense. And Hayden Hurst is going to be a guy that Will Muschamp and Kurt Roper are going to rely on heavily this year to be able to get down the middle of the field and open up the sides for some of these wide receivers that we talked about last week. And big kid, 6'4", 6'5", in the 245, 250 range. Very good leader. Needs to have a breakout year. We kind of continue to talk about his potential and what he could be. He's had some really good moments. He needs to do it consistently on a week in, week out basis. And if he can do that, because they'll line him up in different positions. They'll put him on the line. They'll move him out, kind of put him in the slot. If he can do that, that again just really enhances the offense in terms of mismatches with linebackers or smaller defensive backs that have to come up.
So, yeah, he caught one touchdown in his sophomore season last year, 48 catches for 616. That looks nice, but the one time in the end zone, I would think Will Muschamp and company would need that to increase considerably this year. You would expect somebody of his caliber, what's expected of him as an all-SEC candidate, maybe he catches 6 or 7 touchdowns this year, and that would help out the scoring output. Jacob August, Keel Pollard, those guys saw the field last year, combined for 6 catches. And you got this kid in Will Register who hit campus this summer, 16th rated tight end in the country, number 5 prospect out of South Carolina, according to 247. Do we know much about these guys at this point?
Well, let's go through the roster. You left a couple guys off there. I think you start with Casey Crosby, who is a tight end, but he's a smaller guy, 6 foot, 6'1", about 230. Great hands. Had a touchdown catch, I believe, last year. Only caught 1, I believe. But as a kid that you look at the tight end position, I don't know. He's not your typical tight end. He's not going to be a very good blocker. Personally, maybe he's a little bit more in the Patrick DeMarco H-back type role, but they're going to split him out. Maybe the best set of hands on the football team is with Casey Crosby, a local product out of Bamberg High School, entering his junior season, has a redshirt junior season, has a chance, I think, to make an impact on the offense. Not what you would consider a game breaker, but a very reliable pass catcher. And so he's going to be right there. Then you're going to look at Keel Pollard, who had the monster spring game. Pollard came to South Carolina as the 6A Offensive Player of the Year at in the state of Georgia. Was a wide receiver, got a little bit bigger. Again, not a tall prospect, 6 foot, 6'1", but closer to the 235, 240 range. But again, great hands, great work ethic. This is a kid who just was behind some other players last year, didn't really find his way onto the field, but I expect him to have an impact at the tight end position as well this year. Then you talk about a guy like Kyle Markway, who's more of your typical 6'3", 6'4" tight end, going to be more of a blocker, is going to see time on the field this year. You mentioned Jacob August, who again is a taller tight end, 6'5", is a walk-on. Needs to have, this is a kid who actually had a preferred walk-on opportunity at Penn State and a preferred walk-on opportunity at South Carolina and stayed home. We've kind of thought he might develop and come along a little bit faster. I think that's a kid that you're looking at that could surprise people. So those are your main tight ends. You got Markway, you got August, you've got Pollard and Crosby, which are, again, different kind of tight ends because they're smaller, 6 foot, 6'1". And then you've got the leader of the group in Hayden Hurst, a guy to keep an eye on that I think is fascinating. South Carolina beat out Southern Cal for his services 2 years ago, and he redshirted last year, is Evan Henson. Now, Evan Henson's a guy about 6'4". He's in the 235 range. Actually played on the basketball team that went to the Final Four this past season, so he didn't go through spring ball, but Evan Henson is a ultra-athletic tight end that can run, has got some ability to get down the field and stretch a defense from the tight end position. How does he factor into the rotation as well? That's a guy to keep a close eye on as we go to fall camp. So South Carolina's deep, and that's not even mentioning the guy that you talked about, Will Register, a bigger kid, had gained a little bit of weight in high school, probably will redshirt going into this season, is a guy that I don't think you'll see a whole lot of. Actually could end up growing into an offensive tackle depending on the strength and conditioning program and what he eats. But right now he's currently slated to be a tight end. South Carolina's got a lot of tight ends. You hear me rattle off 5, 6 names there. That is one of the deepest positions this ball club has, and it's got some quality football players, even though they're not your typical tight end size when I reference Casey Crosby and Keel Pollard. But there are some good pass catchers. There is a game breaker in Hayden Hurst. It's a position that South Carolina's offense will utilize in 2017 and go with multiple formations to get some of these guys on the field because they're some of the better offensive players.
Hinson out of Deltona, Florida, in that 2016 class, a top 30 tight end, who I believe we've mentioned before that you mentioned moving from the 1SC to the more important, more highly established SC on the East Coast for South Carolina fans. But so once you size it up like that, Will, definitely a group to look out for that's pretty deep. Looking on the surface, maybe Hurst and just a scattering of guys. You mentioned Crosby. That was my oversight. Caught 23 and actually 4 touchdowns, and 3 of those against SEC competition for Casey Crosby last year in 2016. So the tight end position looking good for South Carolina.